Thanks for agreeing to do this.
That's all right.
So, I run a small podcast channel and I talk to people who have interest in hobbies or interest in knowledge.
Hmm.
And I know spiders is something that a lot of people talk about, not always in the nicest way, but it is something that raises a lot of interest. And
Hmm.
I just thought it'd be interesting to talk to you to kind of dispel some of the myths, maybe enlighten a lot of people regarding these fascinating insects and some of the facts that a lot of people don't know about spiders, if
Hmm.
that's okay.
Of course it is. I mean, they're
So,
not insects, by the way.
sorry, yeah, yeah.
That's all right. No, just checking.
No, I mean that's something I'd like to come on to because I know that people kind of use those terms interchangeably, but
Yeah, yeah,
they are their
yeah.
own uh, species. So I'd just like to introduce you. So you're Dr. Geoff Oxford of the British um, Arachnological Society. Is that
That's
correct?
right. Yeah.
Um, and you've kindly agreed to talk to us about UK spiders, but also spiders in general.
Hmm.
So I've just got a few questions about spiders. Some of them are quite simple. If we could just start with a few of the simple ones
Okay.
first. So are spiders nocturnal?
Some are, some are not. Um, I mean, spiders are around day and night. I mean, they don't sleep. So, in terms of activity, some are more active at night and less so during the day, and vice versa.
It's interesting you say they don't sleep. Is that in the sense that we sleep? They have another way of rejuvenating?
Well, I guess they have quiescent periods when they're not running about actively collecting prey. But I mean, I don't know what sleep means to a spider,
Okay.
or what it would mean.
Okay, so they have periods where they're less active. Is that fair to say?
That's right. In fact, well, actually, it's interesting about sleep because someone has just reported that a particular jumping spider seems to undergo periods of rapid eye movement, which, of course, in mammals is associated with dreaming. Now, whether spider REMs is the same as mammalian REMs is another matter, but I mean, it's kind of interesting.
Is it fair to say there's still lots of areas of spiders that people don't understand that science is still
Well,
learning?
hugely. And I mean, spiders are such a good group to be interested in because even our commonest spiders, there's so much we don't know about them. Um, I mean, in fact, it's interesting that we sometimes know more about our rarer species than we do about the common ones because people always think, well, they're common, someone must have, looked at this, that, and the other. And often they don't. And this is an area where anyone with an interest in spiders, can pick a species that's common around them and just examine them closely, follow them, and they can discover new things. Do you want an example of that?
Yeah, please, yeah.
Okay, so some years ago, one of my research interests is large house spiders, the big hairy brown jobs that people love to hate, but are actually very beautiful when you look at them closely. Anyway, I had a female in a web in my garage, and I kept an eye on her, and she disappeared one day, and the web was empty for a few days. And I'm kind of making this up because I can't remember the exact details, but this is the gist of it. And then I discovered a tiny juvenile spider had taken over her web. And then that disappeared. And a bit later, there was a mature male on the web. So, what we hadn't realized before is that these webs are sort of ancestral structures, if you like, like an ancestral home, and that different individuals take over these webs as the previous incumbent dies or moves off somewhere else. So these webs are sort of semi-permanent structures. And because of the way they catch their prey, they're not sticky. And so they last for a very long time. And they're just taken over by different individuals.
Do do spiders stay in the same nest for their life, or are they nomadic? Do they go to other nests?
Well, if we stick to large house spiders, which I know quite a lot about, um, during most of the year, they're stationary. So males and females are growing up in their individual webs, often in houses, behind furniture, behind skirting boards, but also outside as well, under stones, behind wooden paneling, and so on. So they grow in their individual webs. But then in sort of August time, males mature and they need to find a female. So they have to leave their webs at that stage and they go searching for a female in her web. So females tend to be more localized, shall we say, than males, but both are localized during their growing up, and then mature males have to wander.
And how long do house spiders live for, approximately?
Males live for about 18 months and females for about 2.5 years.
And in terms of their mating cycle, do they breed once a year? How often do they breed?
Okay, so eggs are laid in spring. They grow, both males and females grow to about half size, so kind of juveniles, by the next winter. They overwinter and then continue growing to maturity the next spring and summer. That's when mating takes place. Males then die. Females overwinter with stored sperm in their bodies. And then the next spring, when temperatures increase and prey, flies increase in numbers, they start to lay their eggs. So that's the cycle.
And do the house spiders, how many spiderlings would hatch from a typical when they mate? How many would hatch from
How
the
many
mother?
eggs? Well, from
Yeah.
each egg sac, you get about 60, 70 young.
Yeah.
But
And
the mortality is very high. I mean, just after they've hatched, for example, they start to eat each other. So it's pretty tough game out there.
and is it kind of the bigger spiders eat the smaller spiders? How does it work in terms of the cannibalistic
Well, they're all
nature?
roughly the same size. I guess
Yeah.
it's just a matter of chance. If one is slightly injured or, as you say, slightly smaller, perhaps, then they're likely to be the victims.
There does seem to be, from reading about spiders, a cannibalistic theme that runs through all different types of spider, from the males being eaten by the females after copulation or before they've copulated, and then I read about the spiderlings eating their mom. If their mother dies, they'll often eat their mom. Is that true?
In some cases, both of those are true.
Yeah.
There are, excuse me, I've got a sore throat. In Britain, there's a lovely large spider called the wasp spider, which is spreading rapidly, possibly because of global warming. And in that species, the male is very small compared to the female. It's a sort of midget male, as it were. And they tend to suffer greatly at the hands of females. So if they, after they've mated, if they escape, they're jolly lucky. But for most spider species, they finish mating and the male whizzes off pretty quickly. So the idea that males are always eaten by females is wrong. Although, as I say, in the wasp spider, it's more right than in most spiders. In terms of spiders, did you say eating their mothers?
Yeah. When they hatch.
Okay. Normally not. In many spiders, females lay eggs in a silk-covered egg sac and then go off somewhere else. So the eggs hatch, the egg sac hatches on its own, and so there's no mother to be eaten. But in some British species, like the beautiful ladybird spider, and in the laceweb spiders, the very common around houses, the female stays with her young. They regurgitate liquid food from their mouths for the young to drink. And when the female dies, the young eat the mother. I mean, it's a really good lesson in protein recycling.
Is that because, like you say, they get the nutrients from the mother to help them grow? Is that a part of the?
That's right. You know, the mother's there, the mother's dead. Why not eat her? I mean, it's a bit
Exactly.
macabre to us, but you know, to a spider, it's a massive source of food,
Hmm.
and but that only occurs in a very small number of British spiders.
Yeah. Going back to house spiders, can they survive
Mm.
outside? So often people,
Oh
when they see
yes.
a house spider, will put them outside. Do they return to their house immediately, or can they live perfectly happily in the
Uh,
outside
so are we
environment?
talking about large house? I mean, we have a number of spiders, about 20 species that occur in houses. Are you talking about the big brown
Yeah,
jobs?
yeah,
Okay, they live outside perfectly happily.
yeah.
I've spent many years surveying the distribution of the species, the large house spider species, and to find them, I normally go to a churchyard and poke around there, where people don't mind you poking around, and the spiders are just there. So they live outside all year round, perfectly okay, but they're also fine inside in houses, garages, sheds, and so on and so forth.
I heard, I read something on the internet about spiders having blue blood. Is that correct? Is that
Yeah,
depends on the species?
yeah. I mean, it's very, very pale blue. I mean, it's not a royal blue, but there's a bluish hint in there because the oxygen carrying chemical in spider's blood is hemocyanin, which has a slightly blue coloration, as opposed to us having hemoglobin.
And going back to domestic spiders, just for the record, are there any poisonous spiders in the UK in terms of a danger to human life?
Well, poisonous means dangerous if you eat them.
Okay.
So it's venomous. Um, so spiders are venomous. They
Yeah.
if they bite you, they inject venom
Yeah.
rather than you actually, you know,
Sorry,
swallow
digest
it.
them. Yeah.
So they're venomous. There are a handful of spiders in Britain um, who are large enough and have powerful enough jaws to break human skin. But those spiders are not aggressive. They don't come at us. I mean, there's no reason for them to do that. And the only reason they may be persuaded to bite is as a last resort, if they're being poked or squashed. Um, I mean, some people do get bitten by spiders, and it's often in bed. If a spider is on the bedclothes and they roll over in their sleep,
Mm.
and they trap the spider between their, say, the cheek and the pillow, as a last resort, the spider will try to bite. Now, um, many times the spider won't be able to get its jaws in, so you know, in a sense, it hasn't bitten properly. If it does, it may not inject venom. If it does inject venom, then the effect is usually very mild indeed. The affected place may uh, be painful for a while. It may come up in a red lump, but normally it then goes down after a very short while, and off we go. The danger with spider bites, just like getting a splinter in your finger or scratching a spot with dirty fingernails, are secondary bacterial infections.
Yeah.
So, as with any skin puncture, if you're bitten by a spider, you need to keep the wound clean and as sterile as you can. And of course, the advice is that if symptoms persist, you go and seek medical advice.
Have you ever been bitten by a spider in the UK?
Yes, I've been bitten by a large house spider. I was doing something rather despicable to it at the time, so I don't blame it at all. It was on my finger, so not in a terribly sensitive place, and I was very interested to see what would happen, but absolutely nothing happened.
Okay, so
But to put spider bites into
yeah,
context, as I say, they're very, very rarely, they're rare anyway, but those people who are bitten very rarely have any serious symptoms. And to my knowledge, no one has ever died of a British spider bite. Whereas people have died from dog bites, bee stings, wasp stings that happen much more frequently. And yet people are sort of relaxed about those. But, a venomous spider, oh dear, big deal. So I think it's really worth putting that into context.
yeah. Do spiders drink water? Is that something they do? Would they go to water and drink it like we would or an animal would?
They do if they're if conditions are very dry, then they do drink drops of water from dew or raindrops. But most of the time, they get their liquid from their prey. I mean, if you think about a fly, it's pretty kind of liquidy inside, and so that's where most of their water comes from.
And can spiders swim?
There are some. There is one spider called the water spider that spends most of its life underwater, and so that does swim in some sort of manner. But the life history is fascinating. It builds a domed web amongst water plants, and it goes up to the surface. It gathers air on hairs on its abdomen, goes down to its web and scrapes the air off. So eventually you get a what's called a diving bell underwater. And in that, the spider lives. It ventures out to catch prey, so it eats invertebrates that are underwater invertebrates, freshwater invertebrates. They mate in that chamber, and the only time they actually come above the surface is when the young disperse to new ponds and new water bodies.
It's incredible some of the adaptations that spiders have evolved.
Incredible, incredible.
I read about spiders having a tail. It's kind of prehistoric spiders. One of their evolutionary traits was a tail they found in a fossil. Is that something you can talk a little bit about?
Well, I mean, some arachnids now have tails, did you say?
Tails, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, some groups of arachnids now have tails. If you think about scorpions,
yeah, of
um,
course.
we've got one scorpion in this country. It was introduced a long time ago in trade, and it's sort of established in the southeast of Britain. Only a little job called a yellow-tailed scorpion, totally benign, lives in cracks in walls. But that certainly has a tail. But if you go abroad, you've got things like whip scorpions, which, have tails as well.
In terms of threats to current indigenous species of spider in the UK, are there any threats to their survival that people should be aware of? Are there things they can do to help them?
Well, I mean, the threats to spiders are really the threats to any invertebrate in Britain, any rare invertebrate. So habitat fragmentation, which means that spiders are restricted to very small patches of habitat where population sizes necessarily are low. You get a fire going through the habitat, end of population. So, like many other invertebrates, indeed all organisms, you really need a kind of joined up network, which we're beginning to realize now is essential if organisms are going to move as a result of climate change, and just to maintain large populations which are more resilient to to threats.
I read as well that spiders form a vital part of the ecosystem by their consumption of flies, for example.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, spiders are really helpful to us, although I mean, I don't subscribe to the view that, you know, things that are useful to us are more or less valued in terms of biodiversity. But spiders are very numerous. I mean, if you take a square meter of agricultural land, cropland, for example, you may have up to 120 money spiders per square meter. And these are eating small insects like aphids. And it's been demonstrated that the spiders in agricultural crops can delay the onset of pest populations like aphids. They can't stop them altogether, but they can delay them, which means that the numbers of sprays of insecticides are reduced. So they're really useful in that respect. And worldwide, it's been estimated that the spider population eats between 400 million and 800 million metric tons of prey every year. Now, to put that in context, the weight of the human population in the world is something like 400 metric tons. So, if you like, spiders in the world, are consuming the equivalent weight of humans in the world.
It's incredible when you put it in that sort of context.
Mm.
To think a lot of people are so hostile towards spiders, yet they play such a vital role in the ecosystem and
They do indeed, and of course, I
controlling
mean,
pests.
what's interesting is that they're in the middle of uh, the the web of life, if you like. And a colleague recently said she thinks about it as you know, a lovely orb web hanging in vegetation, and below it, as it were, you've got all the prey that the spider eats, pests as well as benefit. You know, spiders can eat bees and as well, so they're indiscriminate in that respect. But then above them, you've got predators that prey on spiders, many birds, insectivorous mammals, and of course some birds actually use spider silk within their, you know, to construct their nests, like long-tailed tits, for example. So you've got predators above eating spiders, and you've got spiders as sort of middle predators,
Yeah.
eating prey below. So they're a pivotal sorry, uh, you know, position
Yeah, in the food
within
chain.
ecological webs.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Geoff Oxford. If people would like to know more about UK spiders, I will leave a link to the British Arachnological Society in the link below. Thank you. Bye.